Hi guys, today I am going to talk about Darktable. Darktable is a free and open source and cross-platform raw image editor. Now a lot of people may not know what a raw image is or even why they need an editor for one, so I'm going to go over that in just a second, so hang on. Alright guys, we're talking about Darktable today. Darktable is freely downloadable, it is open source, and it is also cross-platform. It can be downloaded to several variants of Linux as well as Windows and Mac, and it's freely usable, and it's a very good software for editing your raw images. Now if you don't know what a raw image is, it's basically the uncompressed data from an image. So if you think of an image in the respect of a JPEG, which most people can associate with, a JPEG is something that you can email, embed in a web page and all that. Well, that JPEG is actually a compressed image, and it is compressed from all those massive megapixels that are just funneling into the lens of that camera, and that actually creates a very large file. So a lot of people don't store the raw images because of file size concerns, but you know, I would say that and recommend that anybody should be, if your camera supports it. Not all cameras, I don't know that cell phones are supporting raw images right now, and you know, I definitely know that some of the small point and shoot, you know, $100 cameras aren't supporting that either. But if you are in the mid-tier, like vlogging camera range and up, your camera will probably support storing, you know, the large raw images. That's something to keep in mind. So you can check the specs on your camera. If your camera supports it, then I would really recommend that people start storing their images that way. And as I said before, the reason why is because you're storing not just the compressed form of that image, but you are storing all that original data that your camera saw. Now, why is that important? Why do you need that? Well, have you ever taken that image that you thought was great, you know, the angles were great, you know, and it's that, you know, the people were together that you wanted to see together, and you got it home and it turned out to be a little blurry. Maybe the color was dull, maybe it was low light, you didn't have the settings on the camera quite right. You know, there's any number of things that can go wrong. Even if you have that camera in full auto, there's still a lot of things that can go wrong. If you are not a professional photographer and don't have that camera set up for that scenario, and even with professional photographers, that's the reason they store files that way in the raw image format. So it's just something to keep in mind. The reason you want to do that is that when you get that once-in-a-lifetime image, you can potentially correct it with the raw image data. You can go in and correct aspects of, you know, the noise level, the highlights, the shadows, the color curves, you know, the gamma. There's a lot of things, the sharpness. There's a lot of things that you can correct about that image if you have all the data available. The more data you have, the more that you can correct. Now, you don't want to confuse a raw image editor with a photo editor, such as Adobe Photoshop. Darktable is more an alternative to Adobe Lightroom. Again, so there's a difference between a photo editor like Photoshop and a raw image editor like Darktable or Lightroom. And it boils down to this. This is the main difference, is that with a photo editor, such as Photoshop, the primary function of those softwares is to alter a photograph. It is to remove a wrinkle, color, you know, smooth over a pimple, you know, change the color, you know. But yes, you can correct certain things about color correction and things, but that's really not the primary function of those softwares. Those software's primary function is to erase things, add things, move things around, you know, create certain graphics, create effects on them. So that's the primary function of those softwares. Now, whereas in Photoshop, whereas your primary function is to alter the image, the primary function of a raw image editor is to correct an image. Now, raw image editors, they do have certain functions such as, crop and things like that allow you some simple editing features. But that's not their primary function. Their primary function is to correct an image. It is, in fact, to, fix those blurs, sharpen an image, correct the gamma, get your color correction done. So, again, that's why it's so important. So, if for some reason something didn't come out with that once-in-a-lifetime image, there is a possibility that you can correct it with the raw image editor. If your file's already been compressed into JPEG format, you lose the potential to fix a lot of that. So that's the reason that you want to use raw images, why you want your camera to store them if it supports it, and why you need an editor along the lines of Lightroom or Darktable. Now there's other free raw image editors out there as well. I mean, Canon has one software. I think most of the manufacturers have some limited software that you can download to do certain things with the raw images. But there's another free one out there that I like called Raw Therapy. But what I like about Darktable, I really like its intuitiveness. I like the way the panels are laid out. I like its workflow. And just the fact that it's cross-platform. It's available, across Windows, Mac, Linux, and so that's very powerful. So that's something to keep in mind. Anyway, I love the software. I've used it for years. It's very stable and very, very useful. So if you've ever been frustrated with pictures that have come out of your camera, and your camera supports raw images, this is definitely a tool. If you've never worked with raw images, this is a tool that you should look into. So, like I said, totally free and open source. So, I'll talk to you later.